forum that we are live streaming in all the platforms, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook of both the International Peace Bureau and the Stop the War Coalition Philippines Facebook page. We are very pleased to welcome you all to Peace in Palestine and Israel, Diverse Voices, Perspectives, and Actions. We have a very um, uh, rich and full topics to cover in our more or less 2 hours of our forum this morning. Without further ado, let me just call on Miss Mercy Angeles from Stop the War Coalition Philippines to give us the opening remarks. And after that, my colleague Michelle Clemente from the IPB will now introduce the speakers for this afternoon or this morning. Depends on where you're joining us from. Again, welcome everybody. Miss Mercy, the floor is yours.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Welcome to all of you who are with us today, wherever you are, today or tonight, no? Wherever you are in the Philippines and in the world. Today we are gathered in this online forum, Peace in Palestine and Israel, Diverse Voices, Perspectives, and Actions, to learn more about what is currently happening in Gaza and Palestine so that we can be guided to what actions we can do. One day, the children of the future generations shall ask our generation, what did you do when Israel was bombing to oblivion Gaza and Palestine and killing the children and their mothers? The world citizens who are gathered here are not mere blind and deaf spectators to the US-backed Israeli genocide of Palestinians. We are standing up, speaking out, and acting against the genocide in Palestine. The main organizers of the webinar are the Solidarity to Oppose Wars Coalition Philippines and the International Peace Bureau. Solidarity to Oppose Wars Coalition Philippines, or Stop the War Coalition Philippines, is a multi-sectoral organization of Philippine-based social movements, trade unions, women's organizations, non-government organizations, political parties, student formations, people's organizations, human rights organizations, faith-based groups, and other concerned organizations and individuals. It calls for an end to all wars of aggression, the escalating threats of militarization, and manifestations of military intervention. It also opposes any form of Philippine participation in these illegal and immoral activities. Stop the War Coalition Philippines and its member organizations have been mobilizing to support the people of Gaza and Palestine. We have taken to the streets to show the world our support to the call for ceasefire and end to the US-backed Israeli genocide in Gaza and Palestine. The International Peace Bureau is one of the world's oldest international peace federations. IPB was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1910 for acting as a link between the peace societies of various countries. Its membership consists of 300 organizations in 70 countries. Its main programs are the Global Campaign on Military Spending and Disarmament for Sustainable Development, which focuses both on nuclear and conventional weapons, as well as biological weapons, landmines, and small arms. Again, a good day, good evening to you. Let's now welcome our speakers, whom DJ will introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Mercy. And now to my colleague Michelle Clemente from IPB.
Good morning, everyone. We will have our first speaker today to to share us on the updates on what's happening in Palestine, on what's happening on the ground. So let me just briefly introduce you our esteemed speaker, and we're very grateful to have her today. So Stephanie Yousef is the Deputy Middle East and North Africa Regional Representative for the International Council of Voluntary Agencies, or ICVA. She received her master's degree in public administration in 2015 and her bachelor's degree in international relations, focusing on the Middle East from the University of Illinois. Stephanie has also been residing in Amman, Jordan since 2016 and working in the humanitarian field since 2011. She also serves as the global focal point or on Nexus, connecting with many countries across the various regions and exchanging challenges, gaps, success stories, and good practices.
Non, c'est pas plus tard,
Je laisse juste ça.
Ouais,
her-
ouais, c'est bon. Si ça vient, mais parce que c'est très compliqué après si tu commences. Hein.
For everyone, for those who
Bah,
are
tu
not
peux, si c'est dans le
speaking,
texte, si
may
c'est dans le
we
texte,
kindly to
Non, tu
request
peux le
to
dire.
mute their mic. Thank you so much. Yeah, sorry for that. Let me just go back. So Stephanie serves as the global focal point on Nexus, connecting
Sharon?
Sorry, I disconnected. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Steph. I apologize. I think my internet just dropped just now. And without further ado, yes, Steph, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that kind introduction, and I'm very happy to be here with you and to see such an event right now in these difficult circumstances, to have difficult conversations. My part for today is to go over what does the situation look like, and coming from a humanitarian perspective, because we're a humanitarian INGO, and we're a global network that has many of our members working in, whether it's in the Gaza Strip or West Bank. So I want to start by, clearly, I won't go over specific numbers, you have this, but over the past 8 months of relentless hostilities, it was characterized by bombardments, ground operations, and the besiegement of the entire population have led to devastating consequences in the Gaza Strip. Civilian casualties, mass displacement, and the destruction of homes and critical infrastructure have reached unprecedented levels. Just about 2 days ago, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, the IPC, report has come out. This is the second report on Gaza, and we had waited for it greatly. And it painted a stark picture of ongoing hunger. Find it that 96% of the population is facing acute food insecurity at the crisis level or higher, so at IPC category 3 or plus, and almost 500,000 people in catastrophic conditions at IPC category 5. The devastation brought about by hostilities continues to be indescribable. Its widespread, intense, and sustained ground and air operations and clashes continue to have resulted in over 37,000 deaths, 85,000 injured, and the displacement of nearly 2 million people. The continued hostilities have caused widespread damage to assets and infrastructure indispensable to survival, including the food, health, and water systems. Almost 60% of all buildings have been damaged or destroyed. And despite some improvements through March and April 2024, hostilities in the northern governments and Rafah offensive resulted in very limited humanitarian access to and within the Gaza Strip, especially in Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunis, and Rafah, impeding the safe and equitable delivery of life-saving multi-sectoral humanitarian assistance. As humanitarian organizations working in Gaza, we have repeatedly urged the use of all means available to relieve the suffering in accord with the humanitarian principles, including humanity, impartiality, neutrality, and independence. But our ability to save lives is jeopardized by severe constraints on our operations. Humanitarian assistance has been consistently and arbitrarily denied, restricted, and impeded by the Israeli authorities. Bureaucratic constraints are preventing a humanitarian scale-up, and these constraints continue to include the closure of vital border crossing, including crossings into northern Gaza, rejection of aid items for entry based on arbitrary shifting justification, including definitions of dual use, lengthy delays, unpredictable processes for the inspection of trucks, and the denial of movement requests within Gaza. There has been repeated attacks on aid workers, convoys, distribution, humanitarian sites, including those who submitted to Israeli authorities as part of the humanitarian notification deconfliction process. Additionally, the Israeli ground offensive is already forcing part of humanitarian staff and operations to close or to relocate to other areas under extremely dangerous circumstances. Humanitarian actors have repeatedly warned the Israeli government that moving forward with its plan to invade Rafah would lead to an unprecedented deterioration of an already catastrophic humanitarian situation and jeopardize the response capacity of aid agencies. We are witnessing yet another violation of Israel's obligation as an occupying power to ensure the safety and well-being of the protected Palestinian population under the Fourth Geneva Convention. The concept of safe zones is void. There's not a single safe place left in Gaza. Systematically and deliberately targeting civilians and aid workers, including those with clearly marked safe zones and evacuation routes, is a violation. Now, Philippe Lazzarini, from the UN Commissioner General at the meeting of the Advisory Commission, he said, and I quote, "In 30 years of humanitarian work, I have never encountered such a blatant disregard for the protected status of humanitarian workers, facilities, and operations under humanitarian law. Turning a blind eye to these attacks sets a dangerous precedent. It compromises future humanitarian work and the rules-based international order in other conflict situations," unquote. When it comes to coordination, it's a bit tricky in this context, as there's so much information and so many various coordination mechanisms. The main response is headed by the OCHA office in Jerusalem. But humanitarian aid is also flowing in through Egypt, Jordan, Kerem Shalom, and most recently Cyprus, meaning that we have to include coordination at all these levels. So there's the in-country, there's the Gaza West Bank, two separate in OPT, and then we have all the regional coordination that's happening. As ICVA, we recognize that there was a misinformation, I guess. Not enough information is being shared with the right actors. So we have supported the establishment of a regional advocacy working group with we coordinate with all of the NGO forums in Jerusalem, in Cairo, and in Jordan, and in Lebanon. And we have also coordinate closely with the local NGO forum in Gaza and in West Bank. We set up meetings with the OCHA regional office and with UNRWA regularly. It is critical that we are consistently sharing information and updates as this conflict is changing, not even day by day, but hour to hour. What we see right now could be changed in the next hour. And so we need to make sure that information is power, that we are ensuring that everybody has the right information, even when it comes to the logistical setups. I mean, everything is in to the political, what's happening at the political level and what's happened at the humanitarian level. Impeding on the humanitarian response is the lack of stability, lack of access, militarization of aid. And according to the statement by the principals of the Interagency Standing Committee, no amount of humanitarian response will make up for the months of deprivation that families in Gaza have endured. But in the Interagency Standing Committee, which by the way, ICVA sits with the principals, we have put out a statement requesting the need for the following: an immediate ceasefire, civilians and the infrastructure they rely on to be protected, hostages to be released immediately, reliable entry points that would allow us to bring aid in from all possible crossings, including to northern Gaza, security assurances and unimpeded passage to distribute aid at scale across Gaza with no denials, delay, and access impediments. A functioning humanitarian notification system that allows all humanitarian staff and supplies to move within Gaza and deliver aid safely. Roads to be passable and neighborhoods to be cleared of explosive ordnance. A stable communication network that allows humanitarians to move safely and securely. And in addition to this, we spoke about UNRWA, the backbone of the humanitarian operations in Gaza, that it needs and must receive the resources it needs to provide life-saving assistance. A halt to campaigns that discredit the United Nations and non-governmental organizations doing their best to save lives. This needs to stop. We need to make sure that UN humanitarian operations, they're now more than ever critical, and we should stop campaigns that discredit it. And humanitarian agencies to remain committed despite the risks, but they cannot be left to pick up the pieces. In addition to the horrific situation in Gaza, tensions continue to increase in the West Bank. There's an increased number of detentions, including children, settlement expansion, settler attacks, and killing of innocent Palestinians. The OCHA website, when they put out their daily update, they include an update on the West Bank twice a week, and they include the figures of those who have been killed, and each time we're seeing an increase. In addition to this, the humanitarian response continues to struggle as organizations are finding increased difficulty in bringing the right team to support the emergency, as Israel has put a freeze on visas. IDA, the INGO network in Jerusalem, has released several public statements about this, mentioning the risk that these laws are impediments on the organization to timely, efficient, and coordinated humanitarian response. And while, again, I've decided in this introduction not to go into the specific figures as they're widely available, rather look at what the humanitarian response is facing, and why it's critical now more than ever to continue to advocate for the same points, access, safety. We're continuing, of course, access is top, and opening and release of these impediments on what is allowed and what is not allowed. It's important to note one very important thing. This conflict is fueling regional escalations. We're currently keeping abreast of developments related to Israel-Jordan relationships, what's happening with Israel-Lebanon, its potential escalation, what ramifications that has on the region, escalations in Yemen, in Iran. There's just so much that's happening that we also must be very much aware of what this conflict could lead to and what are the regional ramifications. So I hope that this can also be ensured that it's on the agenda point and that people are discussing this in the future, as we are as NGOs, ensuring that it's being discussed in all of our conversations. And I hope that I was able to paint the general picture. There's much more to share. We can go on the entire meeting just talking about the horrific circumstances that these civilians are being faced to live under every single day. But I think that I'm going to stop here and see if there are any questions or concerns also regarding or inquiries about humanitarian response, or any other questions about things that I have mentioned. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for giving us the overview of the humanitarian situation in what's happening in Palestine at the moment. And we, in solidarity with you, we know how difficult the access right now and all the difficulties of the humanitarian workers that's experiencing in this current situation. And as you also mentioned, the escalation of this conflict towards the region, and timely we're going to have our next speaker on whom they're going to discuss on the impact of this Israel-Palestine situation to the Middle East. So I will turn over the floor to Emad Kiyaei and Sharon Dolev. So let me just introduce them first. Emad Kiyaei works at the intersection of political risk, disarmament, and diplomacy. He is the co-author of Middle East Weapons of Mass Destruction, A New Approach to Non-Proliferation, published by Routledge. He is also the current director at the Middle East Treaty Organization, METO, which seeks to eradicate weapons of mass destruction from Middle East through innovative policy, advocacy, and educational programs. And together with Emad, we will also have Sharon Dolev. She She is the founder and executive director of METO and also our current council member in IPB. So Sharon has been a peace and human rights activist for over 35 years. And she focused on eradicating nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction from Middle East through innovative policy, education, advocacy, and activism. So she's the founder and director of the Israeli Disarmament Movement, IDM, and the Middle East Treaty Organization, or METO. And Israeli representative of the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize laureate international campaign for abolishing nuclear weapons. I can. So Emad and Sharon, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think that actually we will divide and conquer, meaning Emad will cover the effects of the conflict on the Middle East, and I will actually take the talk a bit elsewhere. So Emad, why won't you start with the effects?
Well, hello everybody, and thank you to IPB and other partners for organizing this timely event. Stephanie, listening to you and the difficulties that the humanitarian crisis that is happening in Gaza and the difficulties that it's been facing in all levels to be able to bring aid was very sobering, and thank you for your intervention and comments. As Sharon said, we're going to take it a little bit differently. And I'm going to bring in more like a regional perspective to this, because as Stephanie ended her talk, she mentioned the ramifications of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, not just, of course, inside Israel and Palestine, but also how it vibrates and goes across the whole region, and actually globally. This is the very unique characteristic of the conflicts that have been going on, the violent conflicts that have been going on for decades between the Palestinians and Israelis. And every time there is engulfment of further violence, we see that it's not just stops in that sort of locale, but pretty much the whole global community in different levels have a say, have a role, and have sometimes perpetuated the conflict, and in other times have tried to contribute to its resolution. But there is these major players that we have to be aware of, because if we can then identify them and the interest in what they have in this conflict, then of course it gives us a better picture of this complexity that we have to face when we're dealing with an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I will touch on basically three key layers. One is that the surrounding neighboring countries to Israel and Palestine. At the moment, still, only Egypt and Jordan have a peace agreement with Israel, and we see how that plays out even in Gaza over the Rafah crossing at the beginning of the war until Israel actually took over that crossing. But you saw the politics that was at play between the Egyptians, the Israelis, the Americans on actually providing access to the humanitarian aid that was necessary to go in. So we see that the peace agreements that Israel and Egypt have, and at the base of that, by the way, is not just about, they liked each other and they wanted to make peace. It was primarily, again, transactional, where United States guaranteed security to Israel through a very special relationship, but on the other side, made sure that Egypt also receives the second largest military aid support from United States in the world. So that relationship is also contractual and transaction. When we see with Jordan, the large population that is Palestinian and this very tight rope that the Jordanians have to maneuver so that they can, keep a lid on what is actually happening internally in their country, which is the fervor that is in response to the war in Gaza. If we go to Lebanon, Stephanie, you mentioned it for a second, but at the moment we are holding our breath in what will happen in the northern border with Israel and southern border of Lebanon, which we have had skirmishes and constant, back and forth, tit for tat attacks. But it is really one of the most critical points we are facing in this conflict, where it can expand and expand extremely in the wrong way. In a sense that the border with Israel and Lebanon right now is, there's a possibility of it's completely opening up another front, and with it, massive destruction that is going to be unleashed again, partially on Israel, but of course on Lebanon as well. And by that inclusion or expansion of that war, we will see that there are other regional players who will come in. And these are the Iranians, who have supported the Palestinians, but also Hezbollah for decades, and other proxies that are throughout the Middle East. And this will make life much more complicated, not just in terms of the expansion of the war, but also for those that are seen as allies or foes of each other in the region. We will be interesting to see how the Emiratis and Saudis and others of the Gulf Cooperation Council play into this expansion of war, or the current containing of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, while they're also facing challenges in Yemen, in Sudan, of course, and across in Libya and Iraq and elsewhere. So when we are looking at it from this regional perspective, we see that we are pitted against two groups: this axis of resistance alliance, which includes Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and Iraqis and others. And you will have those that are like basically standing in support or silent in what is happening in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And these are the ones who have some agreement or close relationship with the key ally of Israel in this war, which is the United States. So we have to frame these relationships with, again, the role of global powers that play inside this conflict. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has gone on. And if we look at the different stages of possibilities of ceasefire, access for humanitarian aid, return of the refugees, and some form of cessation of violence, we see them falling apart, primarily for the fact that there is no real impartial negotiator in the middle. The United States is not, and everybody knows it. And so that's one side. But on the other side, you have also the fact that key players who are part of the problem, but should be then part of the solution, are not invited. And here, I would like to point to Iran again, because Iran has an oversized role in this, but is not included in these discussions because of its relationship with the United States. And of course, by extension, its non-recognition of Israel. And, as we saw in the past few months, even the Iranian response, that was the first time there was a direct attack on Israel. And this continuous expansion and fragility of the environment we are in is just a time bomb. It is no longer an if, but a when, that we will reach a quagmire that will be deeper, wider, and more difficult to get out of. And therefore, this is where I think Sharon will come in a minute, is where we are trying to really identify, how do we go about in this current crisis? How do we get out? How do we actually find solutions? And to do that, we have to really think more comprehensively and expansively in terms of not just the stakeholders at play here, but also the range of views that are necessary to be brought in, and then a new narrative about a future that will require, ultimately, the Israelis and the Palestinians and the region to reach some comprehensive agreement on how we can advance peace and security. And I want to just stop there. We can always come back to more comments and questions in the Q&A, but thank you again for this opportunity. Sharon.
Thank you, Emad, and thank you for inviting me to speak here. I have a lot to say. Some of it might be nice, some of it less. So before I get most of you a bit aggravated, I want to say that I'm actually now celebrating 40 years, or not celebrating, maybe mourning 40 years of being an activist, because I started when I was 14, and now I'm 54. During my activism, I spent the first maybe 20 years mainly in the occupied territories, and especially in Gaza. I'm saying that just so first, when when I say that I feel for Gaza and for what's going on there, it's because I don't have a better word for it. But I spent enough time there to know the streets, to know people, to have friends, and I paid a price for that more than once. I was blacklisted. I was injured. I got PTSD. I got injured several times. I have about 40 arrests in my background. And I continue to pay prices. Having said all that, I want to talk about something that might aggravate you. But before that, I wanted to say, and maybe that's the beginning, it's a good beginning, that Stephanie, I really enjoyed, or maybe enjoyed is not a good way to describe it. I was very interested with what you said. The humanitarian situation in Gaza, I am well aware of, but the list of demands, I think it's a good one, something to create a campaign around. There are two things that I didn't agree with, and maybe it's a good place to start. That not Israel, but that the IDF, that the soldiers fighting in Gaza have disregard to human lives. Yeah. That the government of Israel has disregard to human life. Yes, also our lives, not just the Palestinian lives. Total disregard. That it's a deliberate harm of aid workers and Palestinians. No, I don't believe that, and I don't think that it's true. Maybe there are cases here and there, but no. And the last thing that I don't agree with is UNRWA. I think that the Palestinians deserve that the UN will expand his work on refugees and do real work, because for what I know from the people I know in Palestine, even they don't really trust UNRWA unless they are hired by UNRWA. So I think to demand that UNRWA will be restored is more a political decision and less for the better of the people in Gaza and Palestine. I listened here to the beginning. An organization far, far away decides to do an event on Israel-Palestine, but the descriptions are only on what the Palestinians are going through. There's no vision or no regards to what the Israelis are going through. Israel is the evil, Palestinians are the victims, and that's it. Now, this kind of black and white vision that is, I mean, don't feel bad about it. It's almost everywhere. Not just that doesn't help the situation in Israel-Palestine, it's actually damaging the situation in Israel-Palestine. As Emad said, in the Middle East Treaty Organization, we have a plan. We already started working on it at the beginning of this year. We call it the Middle East Peace Initiative, and that's based on the Arab Peace Initiative. The thing is that in order for this to work, you actually have to do something that it seems like most of you don't want to do. It's called diplomacy. And in diplomacy, when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian, diplomacy means you have to see both sides and you have to talk to both sides. And in order to talk to both sides, you have to be able to see not just look, there's an image, but really see the other. If you can't acknowledge everything that happens to both sides, if you can't acknowledge the trauma that all Israelis are still carrying from October 7th, if you can't acknowledge that there harm and fear and anger in both sides, if you can't see clearly that the evil and good in this story are not Israel versus Palestine, but these governments, right-wingers, extremists from both sides that like the conflict, and those who do everything they can in order to find peaceful solutions. and this is the black, white, good, evil in the story, then you might miss all the opportunities to find a solution. And that's why it's so important for me. As an Israeli, I can tell you, I worked for peace all my life. And yet when I come to events like that, usually, and I won't go into this, but I can tell you that since October 7th, but even before, years before, for most organizations, even though they know my CV, for them, I'm first and foremost Israeli. And I think that that shows a problem. I know that when Israelis say anti-Semitism, everybody's jumping. I can tell you that when you say genocide, I jump too, because these two words might not be accurate. What's going on in Gaza is horrible, but it's not a genocide. Because if Israel had the intention to do a genocide in Gaza, it won't be 2% of the population. So it's not a genocide. Keep saying things that are not true just because they sound more, I don't know, dramatic. It doesn't take the reality that is horrible serious enough. The reality as it is serious enough. The reality is occupation, ongoing occupation, and war. And these two things are horrible enough. Because we chose to be peace activists because we think that occupation and war are horrible. And it's horrible enough and something that we need to work on, even if it's not a genocide, even if it's just what it is, horrible. Disregard killing of dozens of thousands of people. At the same time, I repeat again, if you don't look at the Israeli side, you achieve nothing. So it's not genocide, and maybe it's not anti-Semitism, but explain to me what is the motivation, and if you're willing, if you want to achieve peace, if you're willing to look inward and say, this is something we need to change. Because you look at the Middle East, where 500,000 died in Yemen in the last few years, civilians, by another war that is in the region, hundreds of thousands of people that die in Sudan, in Syria, millions dislocated people, and all you care about is Palestine. So the question is, why do you care about Palestine? Is it because you care about Arabs? Is it because you care about human rights? Or is it because Israel drew your attention? Because with Israel, everything is clear, cut, black, white. And I know that that's not maybe what you wanted to hear from me, but this is an invitation for an open conversation on that. Because yes, as Emad said, we do have a plan. And if you like to talk about it more, I'll talk about it. But I think that when you work for peace, it's sacred. And if you work for peace from the right motivation, you're invited. But if you're not willing to look at the motivation and adjust accordingly, maybe you should look for something else to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Emad, for the critical points that you shared in about this topic. And aside we in this conversation that we have right now, we welcome diverse perspectives and openness, and I hope everyone will have their open hearts and open minds as we navigate this very difficult situation that we are currently in, also this difficult discussion. And thank you. METO has been also been partner for us for a long time, alongside with other organizations as well, working in this topic. And now, as Sharon mentioned, this been organized by another part of the world, which is from the Philippines. So we're going also to see like what are the different responses or actions that been taking part all over the globe regarding this situation. So I will have first our first speaker from the youth side to hear also their perspective and the actions that been doing in the Philippines. We will have Ms. Let me just pull out my screen very quick. We will have Miss Luna Casanova. Yeah, Miss Luna Casanova, she is the head of Youth for Nationalism and Democracy Research and Education Committee. And yeah, and she's also the one of our speakers today that yeah, she's currently here now. I think she can introduce herself more, Luna, and to share more about your work that you've been doing in the Philippines. Luna, the floor is yours. I think you're muted. Would you kindly turn on your audio? Luna, sorry to interrupt. Your audio is muted at the moment.
Okay,
Yes.
hello po.
Yes, yeah, we can hear you now. Thank you. Yeah.
It is an honor to address this forum on Israel genocide on Palestine, a subject that demands our urgent attention and collective action. Today, we gather not only to express our solidarity with the Palestinian people, but also to learn from their unwavering defiance against the oppression and genocide inflicted by the Israeli occupation. Each person in Palestine has in them hope that cannot be overcome, spirit that cannot be broken, and struggle that cannot be suppressed. This is a pivotal moment to recognize and support their enduring hope and indomitable spirit. In the Philippines, as part of the Youth for Nationalism and Democracy, we have organized sit-ins, forums, and cultural protests in light of giving our support to the Palestinian people. We also talked to other networks, one being the Stop the War Coalition. Over the months, we have organized mobilizations to show that the Filipino people are amongst the people in the world that calls for the liberation of Palestine. Palestine liberation is emblematic of a broader struggle against imperialism and a call for global resistance against oppression. We need to examine United States' role in perpetuating this conflict and the broader implications of its military hegemony to better understand the necessity of solidarity and collective action for a just and equitable world. In the shadow of these truths, the U.S. empire teeters on the edge of collapse. The United States, in a desperate bid to cling to its diminishing hegemony, escalates its military aggression through proxy wars, dragging the rest of the world into an era of perpetual conflict and militarism. Consider the cause of this war-driven agenda. As of March 31, 2024, the United States had 1.3 million active duty military personnel across the world. The US military also manages over 4,790 military sites worldwide. The US Department of Defense has $2 trillion of budgetary resources. The vast apparatus of war and control serves to maintain an unjust status quo, consuming resources that could otherwise be directed towards genuine global development and peace. Imagine a world where $2 trillion is spent on building a better future instead of perpetuating war. How many hospitals and schools it will build, how much food and clean water it will provide, how many people it can house. With only a fraction of the Department of Defense budget for fiscal year 2024, it could lift 708 million of the world's population out of poverty and hunger. Instead, it is being used for war and suffering. It is being used to fund a genocide. U.S. foreign aid to Israel epitomizes this destructive agenda. Since its founding, Israel has been the largest cumulative recipient of U.S. foreign aid, receiving about $310 billion in total economic and military assistance. This staggering figure reflects decades of unwavering support from the United States, much of which has been channeled into military aid. In the wake of the conflict that erupted between Israel and Hamas on October 7, 2023, the United States has enacted legislation providing at least $12.5 billion in military aid to Israel. This includes $3.8 billion from a bill passed in March 2024, aligning with the current Memorandum of Understanding, and an additional $8.7 billion from a Supplemental Appropriations Act in April 2024. To put this into perspective, the bulk of this aid, approximately $3.3 billion annually, is provided as grants under the Foreign Military Financing, or its FMF program. These funds must be used by Israel to purchase U.S. military equipment and services, effectively making the aid a subsidy for United States-owned defense contractors. Additionally, Israel is allowed to use a portion of its FMF aid to buy equipment from Israeli defense firms, further fueling the cycle of militarization. What this has achieved are non-stop destruction in Palestine, as it is being flattened to the ground, and 35,000 in death toll, primarily women and children. In the Philippines, the United States has allocated millions of dollars for construction of 4 new military bases. These bases are in addition to the 5 that were already established during the Duterte administration. The primary aim of these military installations is to further the U.S. strategic military objectives, specifically focusing on the containment of China, which it perceives as a significant rival. This expansion of military presence underscores the broader geopolitical tensions in the region, where the U.S. seeks to reinforce its influence and counter China's growing power. The implications of such actions are profound, affecting not only regional stability, but also Philippine sovereignty and independence. The allocation of these funds and the construction of new bases reflect a continuation of the United States' long-standing strategy of leveraging its military power to maintain dominance. This military buildup in the Philippines serves as a critical component of the United States' strategy to project power in the Asia-Pacific region, as much as it does in the Middle East. The hypocrisy of the United States is glaring. It preaches democracy and human rights while perpetuating violence and oppression. It condemns so-called terrorism and waged a war on terror, yet supports and arms those who align with its imperialist interest, whilst funding instability in many regions across the globe. As we stand at this critical juncture, we must expose the United States' role in instigating and perpetuating conflict while profiting from human suffering through its war economy. The U.S. empire, driven by a relentless pursuit of dominance, has not only fueled a cycle of violence in Palestine, but has also entrenched itself in conflicts around the globe. This militaristic agenda serves the interest of a powerful few at the expense of millions. The United States' vast military apparatus and the colossal budget that sustains it are stark reminders of a nation that prioritizes war over welfare, destruction over development. The profits garnered by defense contractors and the political elite at the cost of countless lives, devastated communities, and a world mired in perpetual conflict. Solidarity with Palestine is a stand against this imperialistic framework. Let us unite in this struggle, drawing strength from the resilience of the Palestinian people and all those who resist oppression. Together we can dismantle the structures of imperialism, end the profiteering from war and human suffering, and build a future rooted in genuine peace and justice. Libre Palestina. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luna, for giving us your perspective about this issue. And we're going now to another side of the world. We're going to hear first with Graylick. Graylick Pierre from France. He is also a University of Prince and member of Le Mouvement de la Paix. I hope I pronounced it right, or the French Movement for Peace. Great. Gaelic, the floor is yours.
Yes. Okay. Does everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay. So as you said, I'm a French student and an activist from the French Peace movement since a few months. Um, First, I will present a bit the movement. It has been created in 1948, and its purpose is to advocate peace culture, which means defending a construction of peace according to 8 pillars defined by the UNESCO. The 8 pillars, I will give the first. It's strengthen peace culture by education, advocate for international peace and security, advocate for the respect of human rights, for um, economic development, and for advocate for the women and men equality, gender equality. There are other pillars too, but I will gain time and let you see them. And we campaign for peace regarding regarding several conflictual situations, and one of them is the Israel-Palestine conflict. More precisely, we campaign for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, the withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip, and immediate access for humanitarian aid. We also campaigned for the release of Israeli hostages held by Hamas, the release of Palestinian political prisoners held in Israel. We campaigned for an immediate arms embargo on Israel and an end to military and security cooperation. Also for the immediate recognition of by France of the state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel on the basis on the 1967 borders as Spain, Norway, Ireland, and Slovenia have done recently. Also, we want the resolution of the conflict through respect for law and justice, through negotiation within the framework of international law, which must be applied. This implies an end to the occupation and the colonization of the West Bank and Gaza, and the lifting of the blockade of Gaza. This implies the application of UN resolutions, ICJ rulings, and ICC prosecutors' indictments. From now on, France, because I represent France, must call on the EU to suspend the EU-Israel Association Agreement because it's one of the countries that didn't do it. The broad vote by the UN General Assembly in favor of the state of Palestine shows that international solidarity is not without effects. And now we think that it's possible for all EU member states to recognize the state of Palestine, even if some countries are still missing, such as I did France, such as France. I also would like, in the name of the French peace movement, and in my name too, to give my full support to all the victims of this conflict, from the victims of the 7 October attack to all the Palestinians that are now under bombing, that suffers from hunger and thirst. yes, I would like to call for solidarity. Regarding the actions we are taking to help resolving this conflict and help Palestinian people in the French peace movement, we regularly call for demonstrations in the hundreds of cities in which the French peace movement is implemented. We regularly make pressure on the governments in order to, for instance, recognize the the Palestinian state, sorry, and the French peace movement went 6 times in the past in Palestine and Israel to meet the locals, but also the Palestinian authorities and the Israeli peace movement, because we want to work with them in order to build peace. We are also preparing now a new delegation for Palestine for September. And we created a petition for the recognition of the Palestinian state, which has not that much signs because it's 7,000, but it can grow again. In a more personal plan, I belong to a committee of young people, and we are fighting for peace in Gaza and in the rest of the world. And we have a project called the Young Citizens for Peace Project, which consists in organizing video conferences of young people from around the world to talk about peace and peace culture subjects. If some of you are interested, or if people around you who are young are interested, I can give you later my contact details, and if you can call me. I committed myself to this project and for peace in general because because I became aware of the several conflicts in different parts of the world and of the terrible situations in which so many people were living, for instance, here in Palestine. And I just wanted to act in order to help trying to solve those complex and terrible issues. So I wouldn't be engaged in the peace movement today if there wasn't too many conflicts and if I wasn't that outraged by those situations, to speak more about my own engagement. That's why here is my opinion as a non-expert but optimistic young activist. Is that the more conflictual situations there are, the more activists for peace there will be, and especially for those who grew up with those kind of situations. For it's the case with young people today and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We grew up with the Israel-Palestine conflict. And today, in fact, there are a great support to the peace in Palestine from students, and a lot are ready to act for peace, at least in my university. So that's why that's a real relief that this fight to peace, if the situation isn't figured out, won't be left behind, at least for some decades. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaelic, for your very inspirational speech, coming from a young peace activist that currently is studying. And also, a fun fact about Gaelic, he's studying mathematics at the moment at the University of Rhines. And thank you so much for sharing your motivation and also your project to start the global movement of youth. I think there's also so much here, our participants for today. I think there's also some youth that are watching us in our live stream. So hopefully they can also join your initiative of the network of global young peace activists
Thank
or
you.
advocates. So you can also share your contact here, and then we can share it
Yes.
to our networks as well. And for our next,
I
Thank
will
you.
share my contact detail if some are interested in the project.
Thank you, Gaelic. For our next speaker for today, we will have Ibrahim Abu Ahmed. Ibrahim Abu Ahmed is a Palestinian-Israeli political and peace activist, speaker, and writer. He is also a co-creator and co-host of the podcast Unapologetic, The Third Narrative. He speaks to various groups, including students, journalists, elected officials, and policymakers. His field of expertise includes the challenges of the Arab community in Israel, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the developments in Syria and Lebanon, and the Iranian intervention in the region, among others. He has a master's degree in national security studies from Haifa University and a bachelor's degree in international relations, studying at both the American University in Cairo and James Madison University in Virginia, USA. He was born and raised in Nazareth and currently lives in Central Israel. We're very much grateful to have him today. And Ibrahim, we cannot also wait to hear more about your work and your responses in this situation. Ibrahim, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to everyone who's here, everyone who's joined this conversation, people who are listening, people who are talking. I think the communication and the discussion about the future of our region is crucial, and it's important that it's happening from both institutes, both in the Philippines and Germany, and hopefully all over the world. As mentioned, I come from Nazareth, which is a city in Israel, and I come from the Arab community here in Israel, known politically, as the Arab citizens of Israel. But however, we are a very unique community because we are a community that is part of the Palestinian people, but we're also Israeli citizens, and we are living as part of the Israeli society in the same time. Meaning that with all the challenges, and we have many challenges as a minority living here, we still have dual life in a way, in being able to have both experiences, having one Palestinian eye to the world and one Israeli eye to the world, because we live both realities, we understand both challenges, we can see both perspectives, both aspirations, as well as both sufferings, because we live this dual reality and a very challenging reality for our community. I can share with you that personally on October 7th, for instance, I woke up to friends calling and asking if I'm okay, because people didn't realize if I was in the supernova party that was happening or if I had friends. And once I realized that, I started to call my friends, try to understand where they're at, if everybody's okay. And I had about 4 friends that had 6 people missing on October 7th. And what I could contribute to my friends is to try to help find them and look on Telegram pages in Arabic. This is what I spent October 7th doing, is trying to find people who are missing. But ironically enough, on October 8th, since I live in a predominantly Jewish community in the center of Israel, where the majority of the work hub is, sometimes as an Arab, as a Palestinian Israeli citizen, you need to go to the center in order to get a better job, a better experience. So I live in a majority Jewish community. And funnily enough, I left that community and went to the north where it's majority Palestinian communities in order to be with my family, because I was afraid. I was afraid of the repercussions that will happen towards me immediately. We were sure that the first response is going to be against us, against our people. And a lot of the Palestinian Israeli citizens left to the north in fear of a repercussion. And then 3 days later, I'm calling my friends in Gaza and trying to figure out, are they okay? What's happening with them? Are they going south? There were rumors of this humanitarian corridor going to the south, and trying to make sure that they're okay if they're trying to get out of Gaza. So having all these three layers of emotion all in the same time really is something that is unique, I think, to my community. And the fact that we have two eyes to this world means that we actually have the keys to the conflict. We're the only ones who have both realities, speak both languages, by the way, fully, live both challenges, understand both realities, and concede aspirations and what both people urgently need. And this is what drove me and my partner on our podcast that we started after the October 7th, called Unapologetic, the Third Narrative, to speak up. Because I've been speaking to groups, as mentioned in the bio, for 5 years now, over 5 years, but I felt that it's now or never. Right, the first week, 2 weeks after the October 7th, no one knew where the world is going to go. We felt like it's carpe diem, that the world is going to end for us, that it's going to be an all-out war at some point. And my feeling was that if I don't speak now about my views, my understanding of the situation, and my vision for a better future, I'll always regret it. And this is why we started the podcast, and we started it by actually saying we are bringing a third narrative. Because when we started, we decided also to speak in English, and our podcast is in English because we wanted to talk to the world. Because what we saw in the world, that the polarization of the discussion about the situation was immense. The understanding of the situation was very black and white, and that there were essentially two narratives that existed in the world. You're either pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian. And if you're pro-one, it means that you're anti the other. And what we are saying is that our third narrative is a space that can hold both sides. You know, you can be pro your own people, obviously. You can be pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian, but you do not need to dehumanize and demonize an entire peoplehood in that process. And also, if you don't have a particular personal interest in this conflict, you can also be pro both. You can be pro humanity. Anyone who's in that spectrum, for us, is part of the third narrative, a place where we promote dialogue, discourse, and discussion, because that's something that's, since the beginning, we saw that it's lacking. When we were looking at the beginning of this conflict at the world, we looked at it as if we are at a football match. The Israelis and the Palestinians were the two teams. And you, the international community, are the spectators. And essentially, you, as the fans, are choosing your favorite team, sitting in their stands, wearing their colors, their jersey, raising their flags, and chanting their chants. And essentially, what you're telling us, you need to defeat the other side. Defeating the other side will only defeat both sides. Any promotion of continuation of the conflict and for one side to win will result in both sides losing. And the argument in the world became so polarized that we decided to make an action. And speaking of one of the things that came up earlier in this conversation, that the issue of terminology, my biggest problem with terminology is that in the international community, in the international discussion and the sphere, the terminology became the topic, not the conflict. It was, for me, it looked like people, you're either pro-Israeli and you're pro-Palestinian, and we're doing arguments based on terminology in order for me to refute the other side, or the other side to refute my beliefs by using the terminologies. And if I can refute you, that gives me moral clarity that I'm on the good sides, the good people's side, that my stance for one side is a good one because I'm telling you that, you know, the terminology is right or wrong, depending on the argument, and the argument ends there. The discussion ends there. And this is simply not good enough, because what we're calling and what we hoped, even since the beginning, and we're still hoping for now, from the world is a support and a call and a push for an end to the entire conflict. Not just the war, not just the occupation, but the whole conflict altogether. If we talk only about Gaza, we had wars in 2008, 2011, 2014, 2021. 4 major wars in Gaza. And the world stood up, protested. When things went back to semi-normal, there was no active war. The world forgot about Gaza. The world forgot about the situation. The world forgot that there's a still ongoing conflict that will breed another war if we do not put an end to it once and for all. And this is what we are urging the world to do. And we're seeing that cooperation and support is actually beneficial. And we hope that the action that people will take for our people in Gaza, because I have friends there that are still there. I have friends who left. I have friends who are unable to leave. And I have friends who are desperate for a better solution. And we've seen the cooperation that resulted in, like Emad mentioned, about the Egyptian border. But there's also, for instance, I met only yesterday with the CEO of Eco Peace, Ecology Peace, which is a trilateral peace movement between Israel, Palestine, and Jordan that opened pipelines of water in order to get into Gaza. These people exist. This relationship and these a mutual work together is what can give us a better future. One personal friend of mine, his name is Maoz Inon, lost his parents on October 7th. Now, Maoz, he have worked for over 20 years to promote Palestinian narrative and tourism in Nazareth, my city, to promote Palestinian tourism in my own city, to help us, because he believed in peace and he believed in working together and he believed in flourishing our own identity as Palestinians inside Israel as well. That person lost his parents on October 7th. And after many tears, he decided that he will speak even louder about peace, that he will speak even louder about his belief in a better future. He did not cave into hate and actually stated that the two sides that are the perpetrators and who caused his parents' death are the Israeli government that gave his parents false sense of security, living on the borderline of Gaza, and Hamas, of course, that eventually killed his parents. And he stated that he forgives both sides because he's not willing and he will not allow Palestinians in Gaza to be killed in the name of revenge for his parents. These people exist. The biggest problem that we're facing right now is that the people and the voices that are calling for peace are just not the loudest. It's not that they're the smaller. It's just that the more radical voices, the polarized voices are the ones who are being the loudest and being heard the most. And we have to change that. Because I'm facing this also myself. When you're talking to the world, as a Palestinian, as someone who looks for a better future for his people, Palestinian peace activists are delegitimized. They're looking at us as illegitimate, who, we do not know who we're talking about. We're not real Palestinians simply because we're talking about peace. And it's not just because I live as an Israeli citizen. I know people who came out of Gaza and talked about peace and were silenced, including one reporter, including a few reports that were happening inside Gaza, and people talked about their hope for a better future, and people criticized journalists who interviewed those people. The people who want peace are being silenced. I had a personal conversation from a person from Gaza who is a good friend, who he lost all his family since the beginning of this war. He only has one daughter left, a daughter that he pulled out of the rubble. And the way that he told me is, Ibrahim, I don't care where they put the border. I don't care. You can put it here, you can put it here. Just leave me alone. What I want is for my daughter, the only one I have left, is to have a good life. That's all I'm asking for. And that's all I'm going to fight for. And these voices are the ones that need to be heard, because in the past, we were close to peace. It's not that this is, an unimaginable, radical idea. In the late 1990s, when I was raised, we were this close to a two-state solution. The only problem is when you are so close to reaching a solution, we must be aware that the most radical voices will do all they can to prevent that from happening, prevent from a resolution to happen, because they want everything. It's on both sides. It's Palestinians who believe in the whole land and radical Jewish settlers who believe in the whole land. In that period, when we are constructing a peace agreement, on the Palestinian side, we've seen the worst and most horrific bombings of buses inside Israel, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, restaurants. And on the flip side of it, one radical settler killed the Israeli prime minister who was pushing for peace. Back then, we let them win, because after that, the word peace died here. In the early 2000s, the word peace died. And the issue is that these people, and back then, when I say we're close, the statistics show that we're talking about, even in political science realm, you need 2/3 of the population in order to pursue for peace. We had 2/3 of both populations who were looking for a two-state solution. Now it's less than 1/3. It's not that they all died. It's not that they all vanished. They didn't all disappear. They simply lost hope. They simply lost hope. And where hope can be lost, hope can be gained. And we need to give people hope. We need to show that there can be a better future. But we can't do it alone. We need Palestinian voices for peace. We need Israeli voices for peace. We need the world to help us promote these voices, uplift these voices, and not to silence these voices, and promote them and push for an end to the entire conflict. Even when we talk about the two-state solution and people say that it's dead and the old one is not relevant anymore, well, guess what? There are multiple initiatives who have upgraded the two-state solution, who have upgraded a way to create a better situation for two states, because at the end of the day, no one is going anywhere. We have Israelis here and we have Palestinians here. Both people want the land. Both people want self-determination. Both people want self-governance, and both people deserve it. And the only way to do it is by providing the people the ability to have a statehood of their own and a living of their own. But I'm also not naive. I know that the situation is not easy, because the world hasn't done enough to push both sides to do this. In order to actually have a real push for both political entities to get into the discussion table, which hasn't happened since the last, any mention of any idea of a solution was in 2008. Ever since, we haven't heard about it. But because there is no urgency, there's no agency, and there is no pressure from the international community on both sides to get into a negotiation. If we look at the Israeli side, the US, they can put in an ultimatum. No funding, no military funding if one more settlement is built. No more military funding if you don't sit into the negotiations table. And the same thing is for the Palestinian Authority. There is no funding from the European Union, from the US, if you do not engage in a two-state solution, if you do not engage in negotiations, and if you do not also engage in improving the Palestinian statehood. Because, and I'm filled with a lot of hope. And when people talk about the importance of having a Palestinian state, that's no-brainer for us. Of course, there has to be an existence of a Palestinian state, but what are we advocating for? Which state are we advocating for? Our people, if you ask the real people on the ground, if you ask someone from the West Bank, he'll tell you, I'm occupied twice. The first occupation is by the Palestinian Authority, and the second one is by Israel, because the Palestinian Authority is an illegitimate entity that is controlling Palestinian life. It hasn't held elections since 2005, 2006. It hasn't promoted any elections, and actually, in fact, it silenced young people who believed in a better situation. What's happening in the Palestinian, in the West Bank at the moment is that the Palestinian Authority is taking all the money. Do you know anyone who has any checks and balances to where this money go? Does anyone know if the money goes to the betterment of our own people, to their lives, to their infrastructure? I can tell you that it's not. It's going to the personal pockets of these people. Where is the urgency and where is the call to remove these people? Because we had people who tried. There's one very known story of one political activist named Nizar Bannat from the West Bank, who spoke eloquently about the corruption of the PA, about the need for elections, about the need for a new leadership for our people. Guess what happened to him? He was arrested and he was killed in prison by the Palestinian Authority to silence him. So in order to achieve we need to be realists. We can talk about idealism all day long and have fluffy, beautiful statements, but we need real action, and it needs to be pragmatic action, and it needs to ensure that our people are better off, not worse off. We need a better reality for us, because we know there are incredible, incredible people on the ground, from our own people, from the Palestinian youth, academics. The Palestinians in PhD candidates are some of the highest in the world. Where are these people? They're being silenced. They're being outside of the sphere, outside of the discussion, outside of the negotiation, and outside of the influence within the Palestinian sphere. We need these people to take the action, and we need the world to one and for all to tell us all that this is enough, that we cannot do this anymore. And we need to change, both Israelis and Palestinians. We need to change. We need to be aware that the people come before the land. This is completely the opposite of the current perspective and the current way that both sides are looking at it. The land so far has been the most important thing. But what people need to understand is that without us, without Palestinians and Israelis on this land has no value. This land will not be called Israel and will not be called Palestine. Somebody else will come here and call it something else. What gives this land a value is the people. And we cannot continue to sacrifice our people. And each time we're sacrificing the next generation in order for a hope for more of the land. We're not sacrificing, we're consenting, and we are gaining the future of the next generation. We need to start shifting this perspective now. And I'll end by saying one thing that we always say on our podcast, and I welcome you to come and listen to, because we're promoting nuance, discussion. Not every person we have is someone we agree with. We're talking about very difficult things, but we are able to create dialogue, and dialogue is crucial, because at the end of the day, all of us, Israelis, Palestinians, Arabs, Jews, Muslims, Christians, all of us deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. I think we can listen to you all day for your wonderful sharing that you have with us. And thank you for joining us despite the challenges of technical challenges also there in Israel. We're going now to the open forum. We'll have at least 20 minutes for our Q&A, and it will be moderated by Ms. DJ Janier from Stop the War Coalition and our IPB Executive Director, Sharon. So for those who wanted to ask questions, you can also raise your hands, and I'll give the floor to DJ and Sean to start it.
I have a few basic ground rules before we go into the Q&A here. Obviously, this is a very heated topic, a very emotional topic, and one where it's clear even in our chat today that there are very different opinions, analyses of the situation as it is. My main points are that our discussion here should be first and foremost solution-oriented, rather than focusing on discussing all of the in-depth problems, which we could sit for days and discuss and not have concrete agreements between everyone here. We should be focusing on what is the path forward, how can we move towards peace in Gaza. Secondly, I ask all of our participants to differentiate between governments and peoples. It is very clear that while governments are the decision makers, policy makers, peoples are the ones who suffer the most in wars. So it's very important in our Q&A that we do not generalize an entire nation of people based on the decisions of one administration, governments, etc. Third is that while it is very clear that we do disagree in many ways, It is important also as peace activists that we practice what we preach and that we're able to disagree in peaceful manners with one another. We will not all agree on everything, this is clear, but we do share some basic values in this room of wanting a solution, of trying to work towards a solution, and one in where the people in the region can live in peace. Therefore, I ask for understanding to also be a key of the questions that are asked. Even when we don't agree with what someone is saying, understanding what they're saying is essential for helping us to resolve conflicts. And finally, please, no personal attacks on anyone else who is in this call. We, again, can disagree with opinions, but please do not attack the people who hold those opinions. Thank you. With these basic principles in mind, I will call on first Amani Aruri, then Sharon, and then we can see, I think there's a couple questions as well in the chat that we'll read after that. Amani, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everyone, for all of the interventions. It's really important to keep the discussion ongoing. And I would like to also reiterate on what you have just mentioned, Sean. But most importantly, I think for peace discussions and peace promotion discussions, it is important to come to the platform with really full knowledge on the context, but also on the root causes of the conflict, because we are here to discuss the way forward, as you just mentioned. It is not to discuss who has the right to say that I'm a victim, because everything is clear, and to deny the international mechanisms of the international human rights law, international humanitarian law. It is really important to be cautious of this, because all of our peace activism and human rights activism are all based on standards of international law and peace values, which should not be also neglected at any stage. Just wanted to mention in the beginning that it is important also to, while we are speaking about the war on Gaza and what has been also described and the consensus about it by human rights experts, by different judges in international courts, that what is happening in Gaza is truly a genocide. And aside from this, what is the name of what is happening? It's whether it's an annihilation of a population, whether it is a genocide, whether it's a targeting of civilians, or whether it is just a conflict, let's say. Human lives matter, and what is happening now, it is in contradiction with any standards of international law, with any values of humanity. The forced starvation, and now there has been many studies that has been published and investigations showing that 1 in 5 Gazans, they suffer from extreme food insecurity, which reach up to the level of famine. And now people are being targeted and especially we need to also highlight the disproportionate impact of conflict on women, on girls, on children. We need not to neglect also the gender impact of the conflict in general. I was just watching yesterday a short video of Israeli soldiers invading a house or a tent and releasing the dogs on a woman, and these images resonate with me everywhere. But aside from this, of course, I was in Gaza. I was working in humanitarian actions in Gaza, and right when I came back to the West Bank, the war started, and since then I have lost so many friends, and I have been in very tough situation. But let's not forget about the West Bank. What is happening now in the West Bank is living the shadow of the war on Gaza, and more settlement expansions are happening now with more support, Ibrahim, not only given to it. The support is and for all of the speakers, of course, the support from America, Europe, and everyone who we want to hold them accountable to put conditions on Israel. They are intentionally supporting Israel to do the settlement expansion. So we need to have a more rigorous advocacy campaign, advocacy plan, to reach out to specific parliamentarians, officials, government officials, to talk to them about, to hold them accountable for the human rights standards and international law standards, and also they are accountable for their for being elected by their own citizens, of course. So what is happening now in terms of not only the settlements expansions, but also settlers violence. Maybe we were talking earlier, Sean, and I told you that I had to have my sons travel to my family. I luckily have a family in the U.S., but I'm also deprived from spending the summer vacation with my kids because I'm fearful for their lives. Because I tried to go out with my kids like for many times, and the last time we were attacked by settlers with knives, and they were attacking us with guns, and I almost lost my two sons. So I'd rather to stay away of them for a few months rather than have them killed. But at the same time, running away, what we call running away, or what was described by speakers here, I don't want to mention names because I respect all of you, and I know it is the circumstances that each one live, it alters their opinion, it alters their like how they express it. I'm a Palestinian, I live in the West Bank, I was in Gaza, but I also have Jewish friends, I work with human rights organizations from Israel. But describing this for Palestinians, like that they just want to have a safe life, they just it doesn't matter for them where the borders are. It is really illusionary, and it's falseful. It is really dangerous to say this as peace activists, because we are just denying a whole nation's right to self-determination only because they choose to be safe. Of course, the strategy of starving a whole nation, the strategy of, the increased attacks and settlers' violence that are pushing away Palestinians to leave, pushing Palestinians to leave their localities, their houses. It is the forced displacement, And of course, if anyone choose, like we can say, yeah, they chose to leave, their villages and their cities, but in fact, they are threatened every day. They're intimidated every day. They face attempts of killings and torturing. We have seen what happened in Hawara for so many. Like now, it's the third year of the massacres in Hawara. So it is important to remember, before we bring any solution, before we say, yeah, people are willing to give up on their rights, on their, like, where they are living. Of course, I have the choice to go to the US, but this is my land and I need to stay in my land. It is not a solution for me to say, yeah, what matters for me is just to have my kids and to have my freedom of movement. I am deprived from my freedom of movement after my participation, Sean. It is important because I'm a council member at the IPB, and I'm so proud of being a council member. I was participating in a conference in Barcelona last December together with Sharon. Of course, we had some. Of course, I totally disagree with Sharon with so many points, including what it is called, because this is not the base for our conversation now. We are here to promoting for peace, but of course, we need to remember that we need to be considerate about not putting perpetrators and victims in the same pot. Just the last thing to mention that I also received intimidations as a peace activist, as a human rights activist. I was deprived from my work permit because I used to work in Israel in an embassy, and I received a threatening also through my work, saying that I am anti-Semitic or whatsoever. Some words that I heard from other people, because I call it what should be called under the international law. I'm not a person who would like to attack, and because it is not the way that it should be solved. We are talking about a two-state solution that is a just and long-lasting peace solution for everyone. To have two nations living in peace, living without threats to their daily lives every day. But of course, before we do this, we need to address the beginning of the conflict and why we have reached to this far of escalations and expulsions of violence. Thank you, Sean. Sorry, I took so much time.
Thank you, Amani. We do have quite a short time for our discussion round. Unfortunately, I would love for us to have more time so that we could elaborate on this as well. I know we also want to give some minutes towards the end for final remarks from all of the speakers, and I see two of our speakers already have their hands up. I think before I go to those, though, since I would ask as well, you can include if those are more comments in your final remarks. If they're questions, maybe we can still answer those now. But just for the sake of time, I think we have a couple questions in the chat, so I would ask those, and then maybe just because we only have about 20 minutes left. We go around to all of the speakers, maybe in the reverse order from the order that we did the first round in, so backwards, and give everyone a chance, on one hand, to answer the questions that I'll pose now, and on the other hand, any other comments or thoughts you have regarding what some of the other speakers said. And then at the very end, I'll just give a couple closing remarks from our end, and maybe DJ as well, if you'd like to give some remarks there. But let's see. I don't see too many questions in the chat. I know that one was asked is from Rafi Chowdhury, who says, what is the likelihood of a diplomatic resolution to the current escalating conflict between Hezbollah and Israel? What kind of concessions will Hezbollah be looking for from the Israeli government? Then we have really an open question, but one that often, or if not always, comes up in these sorts of conversations from Mercy Angeles. Is a two-state solution possible? Let's see, am I missing any other questions here? I think they're not, okay. I'm being told those are all the questions for now. There are, of course, more comments. And as always, it'd be great if we had 1 or 2 full days to really go in depth and explore all of this, also in some side conversations. We only have 2 hours today. There's no way we can discuss everything or find solutions, but we hope that some of the comments and remarks that come out of this conversation can be carried forward. And even when we disagree with them, maybe to use them in how we understand the conflict deeper. So with that being said, then I think I'll try my best to go in the reverse order. I think first would be to Ibrahim.
Thank you. I guess I'll also really quick say that absolutely a two-state solution, not only possible, the way I see it, it's the only solution in order to grant sovereignty and self-determination and self-governance to both sides, because we have two people who want that and two people who deserve that. And that's the only way we can move forward, by giving just outcome to both sides. And as I mentioned earlier, there are multiple different two-state solutions. It's not just one that exists. You have the Geneva Initiative with the classic two-state solution that has been modified since the 2000s and changed. You have a land for all that calls for two states under one confederation. You have one new movement that's called the We Anachnu, that's advocating for a two-state solution within the Israeli sphere at the moment. It's a new thing that came out that even includes right of return for Palestinians into Israel. So these things exist, and they need to be discussed. They don't have to be the final outcome, but they are the basis for the discussion. But if we don't even have the discussion, then we're not going to be ever able to know whether or not it's possible. But as long as we're not holding the discussion, it's not going to happen. And one quick last remark, really quick, for the statement that was about what I said about my friend is, I'm expressing here from MENA, I'm just expressing here the personal feeling of one person and his strive for justice, for having a good life. And as I mentioned after, it's the people before the land, but within the framework of a two-state solution, within a just solution. It doesn't mean that my friend says, well, I'm willing to move to Cairo. Not at all. But the arguments and the discussions over two states in the past, and even any discussions about any possible solution, is always stuck on very small specific things, on where the border will lie. Is it 67? Is it new? For that person, that's not the argument. It's not about 67, or if you do land swap or you don't do land swap. It's about giving two states. It's about guaranteeing Palestinian right to have self-determination, self-governance, and have freedom of movement and a just life. This is what we need to be looking at. We can always disagree about the past. We don't have to always agree about the past. Believe it or not, we might not even be able to agree always about the present. Because of our, like Amina said, because we come from different perspectives, we come from different viewpoints, from different realities. But the one thing we have to all agree on is the future. Thank you.
Sean, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I thought DJ maybe you'd want to take over since we're sharing the
Okay.
co-chairing of this part.
So at this point, let me call on Luna Casanova from Youth for Nationalism and Democracy.
Hello. I just want to say that it is important to learn from the resilience of the Palestinian people. And as we witness the rise of global movements that call for a free Palestine, we learn that unwavering defiance is a beacon of hope and a powerful reminder that oppression can be resisted. And while we maintain that there is so much to be done, we know that justice can be pursued no matter the odds. The struggle for Palestine is a microcosm of a broader fight against imperialism and for the liberation of oppressed peoples in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, let me call on Sharon and Dolev. Did I say that correctly?
Sorry, DJ, I think we missed Gaelig here.
Oh, sorry. Right. Gaelic Pierre. Sorry for that.
Yes, I just for the solution with two state, I just wanted to say that as a member of an association, I want to underline the fact that this solution has to be um, defended in two stages. The first diplomatic, such as it is trying to be made now, but also associative, since with there are a lot of people in Israel that don't want this war, and it is important to have links, associative links between Israeli and Palestinian people, and that association try in different countries try to see and meet again and again those association in order to keep the link between Israeli people and Palestinian people, even if in the governments the link is broken. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Gaelic. At this point, let me call on Sharon Dolev.
Thank you. I want to take, it will take me a few minutes, sorry, but as I said at the beginning, it's hard for me to speak to you because some of you, especially the way it comes out in the chat, don't see me as your first and foremost, not just colleague, but in the same solidarity that I expect from a comrade, right? Comrade for peace. It's quite obvious that it's very hard for you to see me as not just one of you, but actually one of you that is doing it for 40 years. The language at the chat shows it very clearly. So now I'll try to put beside my identity and just my life experience as an activist that actually managed to do a lot, right, Emad? And to move states and to change language, because my activism has one purpose always, and that's to find a solution that might work. So as an activist of 40 years that made lots of mistakes and learned from them, I would like to give you that actually want to have peace, see yourself as peace activists. I would like to give you some pointers. One point, especially if you're a youth organization, it's not enough to write papers and to say, we call on, we call on, we call on. You're not states. You're civil society and young civil society. If you call on something, you better have several things with the calling on. Information, research, possible solution, and then an effective campaign to get to this solution. If you just call on, you're no better than the diplomats. Don't give up on solution. If you don't know what you're marching for, and you're just marching for because it makes you feel good, then you're marching for nowhere. You don't know when you achieved your goal. And if you decide to deal with peace between Israel and Palestine, then it needs to be peace between Israel and Palestine. This is not a peace symbol. This is a feast. This is a peace symbol. This is a peace symbol. This is not. So if I'm talking about being effective, we look at what might have worked in this region, and we can see the Arab Peace Initiative. The Arab Peace Initiative says that if the Israelis and the Palestinians will agree on three major points, and yes, people that suffer are willing to give up on kilometer here or kilometer there to end their suffering. For three agreements on the borders, on Jerusalem, and on the refugees, the whole of the Arab world will call for end of, thank you, Luna, the end of conflict and normalization. This is the best might work solution to this conflict. And now as people that want to achieve it, it is our responsibility to remember that we're civil society, where our power lies, and then to make a plan that might work. In METO, with IPB, we're working on a plan that might work. How to combine what we know to do at the corridors of the UN, combined with what we know to do as campaigners, as activists, as people that know how to look at a vision and create a plan and the path forward that is achievable. This was our responsibility. I knew when I came here to speak that it might not be nice, that it might feel not welcoming. But I welcome you to first reflect. Do you believe that there is a solution? And if there is a solution, do you understand that the solution cannot be the end of one entity, but the coexistence of two entities? If you understand that, you're on the right path. If you think that the solution is the end of one entity, well, I don't know how to say it, peace activist you're not. The end of one entity means mass murder. It means lots of pain. As peace activists, I think that we want both states to exist peacefully. We need to talk to both people. We need to show them. We have the obligation to show them what peace might look like, how achievable it is, how it's just a decision of the leaders, and how to push the leaders so they cannot say no to the best offer on the table. This is our responsibility. Do you want to join us? You're so welcome. I don't care how you spoke or wrote in this chat, but if you want to join us, if you want to achieve it, compassion and love to all people from the river to the sea is quite necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. At this point, let me call on Emad. Okay.
All right. I will take much less time. But just again, I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and it was difficult conversations. But if we can go with that one vision of a future that is better, that is a flourishing Middle East, that is a secure Middle East, that is a prosperous and free Middle East, because Israel and Palestine conflict is within an environment, and that environment is sick. That environment is in a deficit. We need to revive it. We need to nourish it. We need to give it new roots or let more seeds grow in it. And for that, we've got to think what will happen after this very short period in our human life or human history, but even shorter in the span of the existence of our planet, and really realize that this is just a moment, a drop in the ocean of time. And it may seem intangible, it may seem horrible, and it is, but it will also have an option to change in the future. The one fact of life will be that there will be change. The direction that change takes is our collective responsibility. What we decide to do, to think, to act on will define what that change will reorient towards. Let us collectively realize that even if we have a very small part, we can change that narrative. And what better if we have a beautiful vision and narrative that we can then build on and then reverse engineer and have all the resources that we already have in the region to move it forward. For that, it requires internal, national, regional, and global efforts that are aligned in the right order, in the right proportion, in the right responsibility on what the future could look like. And I'm saying that because I'm sitting in Paris and I know what the Frenchies went through and what the Europeans went through in 2 world wars. I was with my Iraqi friend yesterday and I said, you know, your country and my country, we butchered each other and we had 1 million dead between the Iran-Iraq war. But these Europeans, we're walking in Mannheim, these Europeans killed 18 million of their own. They were crazy. They were barbaric. And maybe they've decided not to export their wars, but realize what they've gone from and build this union. And that is ultimately what Sharon, myself, and a group of incredible people and organizations are working towards. A borderless Middle East, one that is a Middle East union, one that actually the border doesn't really matter if it stops here or there, because you can take your train, you can take your bike and go across the border. So it doesn't matter anymore at that some point what your identity is. Anyway, I'm leaving you with that, saying that we are hopeful and join us. As Sharon said, we have an open arm and we are able to hear your perspectives and not bring judgment into it. We will bring compassion into it and we will bring in your views into it. With lots of love and blessings to all of you, and may everybody be safe in these very turbulent times in our humanity.
Thank you for that. At this point, let me call on Stephanie, Yousef.
Thank you very much to all. I want to start, by thanking you for this conversation, and very happy to have open conversations with various viewpoints, and to let you know that I come here as a humanitarian and not a peace activist. So we have a little bit of a different mindset in what the focus of our work is. I also serve as a global focal point on the Nexus, which means that we want to push for humanitarian development and peace initiatives to work together. That's why I was really interested in joining this call today. In the case of, to respond to some of the comments that were made. One, in the presentation that I provided in the beginning, I made no personal views. All of it was facts from the different humanitarian actors, INGOs, UN agencies. The figures were all labeled, and there is a stigma also trying to dispute figures coming from the UN or so forth, which we do not stand by. So the situation, we do not, as the humanitarians, we do not recognize what happened on October 7th, but right now we're 8 months in. To respect to my colleagues, this is not a short period when you have no water, no electricity, no food, that you're being shot at through bullets and through rockets. When I come to you as a humanitarian, again, I'm coming to you with humanitarian principles, meaning I'm not going to disclose to you my identity, my background. I'm coming to represent the views of humanitarian organizations. We are neutral and impartial and independent, but we deal with facts on the ground. And the facts on the ground is that we have been unable to effectively respond to Gazans, innocent civilians, and we have failed these Gazans due to impediments that were posed by Israel. We can say we can speak to all the parties, but the only party that has control is Israel. Now, we are not political actors. And the humanitarian coordination team has also most recently had a new position that is much more a coordination role, that is much more political. But our focus is, how do we get aid to the people who need it? And how do we get it, fair and square? In the very beginning of the context, I was very disappointed when we speak about the nexus. OPT, Occupied Palestinian Territories, was one of those that was moving towards nexus and more development funding and more peace funding. All of that was halted to all of the local actors in the West Bank. You must recognize this. It was halted with no recognition of why. Donors had sent to the local actors saying that we have to investigate you without any previous, just randomly to all the local actors, this has come through. We do not stand by that. Of course, there is due diligence in the humanitarian sector. There's due diligence that we deal with our donors, and we expect people to pass those. But those organizations who already received funds had stopped receiving development and peace funds. And this itself, what does that say about these sectors? I want to mention also my fellow peace activists. We need to mention ceasefire now. And that is the first and most important demand in order to ever reach any political solution or peace solution in the future. We cannot continue to act like this. We cannot provide support that is not just needed. It is desperate. People are dying out of starvation. We cannot allow for the militarization of aid. We must act now. We need to repeat that. That's first and foremost as NGOs, and you can go to the UN, you can go to all the websites of the NGOs and join statements. That is our first and foremost request. And lastly, I want to say that, aside from this, we need to advocate together, hand in hand, peace actors, development actors, humanitarian actors, that we must let the humanitarian sector in, that we cannot further complicate this. Just to provide basic needs. Shelter is not being permitted. We're not allowed to be bringing in tents. Food is being turned back. This is the reality on the ground. And I want to stay there, but I have one more comment I would like to add. And again, all this as humanitarian's perspective and not personal views. It is important, not only to recognize the critical, these lists of demands that I mentioned by the principals, and I think that they were very much to the point and what we all need to hear. When it comes to, peace, I'm sure that we all want to act together and we all want to see something peaceful because they're all humanitarians. But I want to respond, these are all humans, all sides. And I want to respond to just one thing, Sharon. I, for one, have no problem with you being on this call. I don't think that, that you're, you said that you were mistreated, and I hope that's not your feelings, because we wouldn't want that. But you mentioned to me in a quick comment, you said to me directly, why are you not doing anything in Yemen or in Syria? Or is it just because they're Arab? Well, Yemen and Syria are Arab as well. And we do work. We are regional. I work in Yemen, I work in Syria, I work in Iraq, and I actually have worked in Ukraine most recently. And
it wasn't a comment to you. It was not meant to you. It was meant to, while we're having all these conversations just on Palestine, when there are other places.
We're having, and then sorry, but let me just finish my last remarks because we're out of time. We are having this conversation on Palestine because that's what's going on right now. That's where the direct war, the Yemen is being pulled into this. Lebanon is being pulled into this. All of these are humanitarian also events. Iraq, Yemen, Lebanon, they're all humanitarian situations that people are working on. But right now, that's on the ground, rockets shooting, bullets shooting, is Palestine. And why not speak about it? And this is one event. And by the way, I can invite you to 10 other events that we have on Iraq, on Yemen, and on Libya, and on so forth, because we do not disregard them at all. And that's what I wanted to say. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
And Yeah, as said before, we could continue this conversation for hours and have many in-depth conversations on so many points that have been mentioned here. And we hope to go further into it at later dates, building off of all the great points that have been mentioned today, as well as the controversies from today, because we also have to talk about the controversies. We now are at the end of our time. I think we wanted just some quick remarks. DJ, I'm not sure, do you want to go first or should I go first and then I give the floor over to you? How do you prefer?
Maybe I'll just very quickly, I want to echo, I think someone said in the chat that maybe this continuing our conversation would be a good thing. So maybe we could consider a part 2 of our of this forum. I, for one, going into while listening to our speakers, I appreciated the fact that they offered. We were true to our title. These are certainly diverse views that everybody has to consider if we are going to talk about what the future would look like, and I think everybody is trying wherever they are to go there, to build upon or to contribute to what that future would look like. And I would also nod to our speakers for coming on board, for sharing their thoughts, despite and in spite their own circumstances. I am very much thankful for that, because once we stop talking, I think that would be it. Nobody would certainly nobody will be listening, and of course nothing will happen. So I think I value that we still keep on talking, even if we might not always agree on everything, but the fact that we're still talking, we're trying to find that common, trying to find that solution. And I think that that's my main takeaway from this forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DJ, and thank you to Stop the War Philippines as well for co-sponsoring the event with IPB. We're very happy to be able to do this together and to bring such a wide-ranging audience all the way from the Philippines through Europe, and I'm sure people also in the Americas will be watching at later hours. Of course, we also have participants throughout Africa and the Asian continent. So I think it's a really good opportunity to bring together a global perspective. And thank you to all of our speakers for your contributions. I think DJ said it quite well. Even when we disagree, we cannot let the conversation stop, and we need to be able to build this together. As a more general statement, the world is in a very dire situation at the moment. And as was mentioned by Sharon and Stephanie, Palestine is not the only place where we are seeing mass death, mass destruction by increasingly destructive wars and political actors who have no regard for human life. Gaza is by far one of the most tragic examples of this that we're seeing, where the death toll is creeping up higher and higher, and where things are really at a point where we have to say this cannot continue. We need a ceasefire now, but we need a ceasefire all around the world. We're seeing from Ukraine to Sudan to Myanmar to the Korean Peninsula and beyond and beyond and beyond. The plague of militarism is growing around the world and costing too many innocent lives. And so in this conversation and so many others, we need to come together as peace activists, as humanitarians, and as people who care about human life throughout the whole planet, to say no to war. And I think this event is a very great example of how we can begin to do that, even when in almost every conflict, of course, there are going to be very divided opinions on how to react. But one of the simple and most essential ways where we can all come together is to say that violence is not the answer. Destructive war and the killing of innocent civilians is not the answer, and we need something better. Let's work for it together, work from various angles. As DJ was saying, we all can do small or big things in our own parts that can contribute together to something larger and to changing the tide around the world for a more peaceful future for us all. So thank you. I forgot to mention one point that I think is quite important here as well, is that our panelists today, and many of those joining us in the audience, are coming from different generations, from different backgrounds. And to bring this intergenerational and international dialogue together is also something that is very inspiring, to show the past present and future approaches to bring together all of those perspectives, to learn from one another. Everyone has something to give, and together we come out stronger. Thank you.